Welcome everyone to the ISM New Jersey Meet the Author series. Thank you to all of our ISM members and guests for joining us today. Please be sure to use the chat or our Q&A tab for any questions you may have for our author today. I would now like to introduce our guest host for this afternoon's program, Sheila Wolney, who will be now taking over the program. At this point, I'll turn the stage over to Sheila.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I am thrilled to be here, and I'm going to get into exactly why in just a second. Just a little bit of background on myself and how I came to be involved with the ISM group. Many, many years ago, I participated as the board chair of the National Women in Leadership Group through the ISM organization and got connected with this wonderful group that was operating out of New Jersey. And through that, had the opportunity to participate in planning some of the National Women in Leadership conferences, of which one of the topics that we were covering several years ago was around how to build up and really address some of the topics or ongoing concerns that women face, both within business day to day as well as the supply chain world. And I was asked to go out and find somebody who could speak to our audience on specific topics related to women in leadership. And through that, I actually came across Lacy and have been a huge supporter and fan ever since. So I am thrilled to have been asked to host this session, and even more excited to announce Lacy and dive into her book, Advancing Through Influence, using her 5 innate female strengths to break through power barriers and advance your career. And in addition to being a writer, she's also a speaker, influence coach. Lacy's the founder of Real Women, Real Success, which is a company that teaches women how to break through power barriers and reach their career goals. And if that's not enough, she currently hosts a podcast titled The Female Influencer, where she shares insights, tips, and interviews for women who want to build their influence at work. She's spent over 30 years in nonprofit management, with 20 of them as a CEO. She's an award winner, recognized leader, receiving the designation as one of Orange County's Women to Watch. She's also, to add on to all of that amazing resume, she serves as a consultant, co-director to the Cal State Fullerton Women's Leadership Program, and sits on the board of the Childhood Drowning Prevention Foundation. She's a mother, grandmother, and dog lover, fellow dog lover, traveling with her husband, Dean, meditating or sitting by her pool, contemplating the good in the world. I love that, Lacy. Among her favorite pastimes when she's not enjoying good food and great wine, especially from that beautiful state of California. So Lacy, thank you so much. We are so thrilled to have you this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Sheila. I'm glad to be here.
So why don't we start with just a really basic question of, what are these 5 innate strengths that we possess, and why should we employ them to advance our careers?
Sure. Okay, so the 5 innate female strengths, we'll just dig right in here, that I talk about in the book are giving, emoting, meaning emotion, emoting, leveraging, delivering, and bouncing back. And the reason that we need to employ these is that we're in a situation where there's an uneven playing field. So I'm, as you said, co-director of the Women's Leadership Program at Cal State Fullerton. And one of the facts of women in college is that 57% of the college entrants are women, and 57% of college graduates are women. It's an even playing field because everybody gets rated the same way, right? There's metrics for that. There's no metrics for women in business. And so what we have is women are 50% of the workforce, sometimes more, but only 8% of Fortune 500 CEOs, little under 30% of government executives, top government executives. So it's not an even playing field. So I would make the case, and often do with my clients, that we need to leverage our female strengths in order to overcome those inequities and gain our place in leadership. It's my belief that women are needed in leadership today, or our strengths are. When you look at what's going wrong in the world today, it's often those strengths that are needed. And so I want to see more women in those top leadership positions.
So the big question for me is, are we ready for this? And by ready for this, I don't mean ready to use these strengths, because I think we do day to day, whether it's in our personal lives or, through work. But are we ready to really talk about this and acknowledge that it's okay to use these strengths?
Well, one of the things I make clear in the book, in the introduction, is that I'm not against men. I love men. In fact, some of the things I learned about my female strengths, I learned from men who were mentors of mine. And in fact, two of them reviewed the book and think that men should read it too, because they acknowledge these strengths as strengths of leadership. These are things that leaders should have. I'm simply making the point that they come innate to women, so let's leverage them. I think when you say, are we ready to talk about this? It depends on the crowd, right? We have a mixed crowd today. It makes it, it makes me feel like I want to make sure the men know that I love men, that men always promoted me. If it's just a female crowd, then that makes it easier, right? Because I talk about the things that we often deal with that come from unconscious bias, that come from things that we don't like to acknowledge, but that exist, and sometimes that we overlook. So it depends on the crowd, but I think if we don't start talking about it, we do our communities and our businesses a big disservice, because there's a lot of research out there that shows that when women are equally represented in leadership, that companies are more successful and more profitable. Over and over again, this has been proven. So I think we're ready. I think we're ready.
I sure hope so, because I think it's an amazing topic to be covering. So there's a lot of women in the workforce. Is there a specific segment of the women in the workforce that you're really focused on with this content? Is it a generation? Is it somebody in a certain position or level in their career?
That's a great question. So I really believe that influence is needed in your entire career. Influence is utilizing these strengths is a tool to gain influence. And influence over things that are holding you back, whether it be a person, I call those roadblocks, or a situation, maybe not having the type of relationships that would propel you to a different level. So that's valuable to every age level. I teach this at Cal State Fullerton. The girls swoon over it, they apply it right away. And what we'll find is that over the course of their career, they will advance more quickly because of it. But most of my clients are in the latter third of their careers, and they're trying to get to the C-suite or to the CEO position. It's all the same stuff, because we all need influence, and influence, it revolves around human behavior. And human behavior is, there could be generational differences, but by and large, we all know what makes us happy. We all know the kind of people we want to be around. And it's becoming that kind of person in part that helps you gain influence. So no, we're all humans, so works for everybody.
Absolutely. So I'll share with you that I did a lot of research in preparation for this, right? So as soon as I got my hands on the book and had a chance to read it, I started floating it around, to some of my colleagues and even my adult grown women, children. So I have a 27 and a 24-year-old that are both women and emerging or taking on their careers. So I floated the content by them, and they were even, really attracted to it and asked a lot of really great questions about, first of all, hey mom, will you buy me a copy of this book when it comes out? Of which I said, absolutely. But also, wanting to know more details around how to apply it. So I had the pleasure of reading your first book several years ago, Keys to Conscious Business Growth. And I know it's been a few years since you wrote that book. What prompted you to write this one now? Why now?
Yeah, so that Keys to Conscious Business Growth was an anthology. So there were several authors. So I don't know that I was prepared at that time in 2016 to go as much into depth with these strengths. It was something that I had simply contemplated for that book about how I overcame the biggest challenges of my career. And I go into this in the book. The biggest challenge of my career was an organization that was falling apart. And I had a bunch of elected officials that were supposed to save it. And when they couldn't do it, I had to pull the fat out of the fire. And that's when I discovered how powerful I am. And so I had to start figuring out, like, what are those superpowers? What did I do? And when I figured it out, it was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this my whole career. And every time I succeeded, I was utilizing these strengths. And every time I didn't, I wasn't. So I started coaching around that. I'm a coach. I do one-on-one coaching and group coaching. And it really came out of a need to get more in depth with exactly how you apply these strengths. And they're simple. Like, I'm always amazed at how my clients and the people I talk to, they come to this realization of how simple these techniques are and how powerful they are and how they really do come naturally. And so I wanted to get that down in writing, and I wanted to have some, I give a lot of case studies in the book. This is how this works. This is how this works. So yeah, that was my goal, is to just get more detail. And then also, so that with my coaching clients, I'm not spending a lot of time on our calls going, listen, this is the principle we're operating from. It's a starting point. You know, they're going to be able to read the book. I really did it for my current and future clients. Read the book, or let me go through it with you. And then we have the basis for our coaching. You know what I'm referring to. You know the principle we're talking about. We know it works. So this is how it applies to your specific situation.
Yeah, so your book is a great blend of both advice and action. So for those who didn't know, and I know she just mentioned, she's clearly a very talented coach, because to be a good coach, you can't just tell people what to do. You have to actually paint a picture and sometimes draw a roadmap that helps them to see how to apply it in their world. You really do provide a lot of great actionable steps, situational, awareness tips. Is there one particular area that you found more challenging than the others to practice yourself?
That's a great question. I think that leveraging the third strength gets complex and tricky. I would consider myself an expert in that now, but when I first started leveraging, and I didn't even know what it was when I first started doing it earlier in my, experience as CEO, there's easy ways to stumble, right? It takes some emotional intelligence. It takes some real, I say, dip your toe in the water, note the response, see how that goes before you move on in this full-fledged effort. So I think that maybe it's not more difficult, but it's more nuanced to leverage. And that's where coaching comes in real handy with someone who's had a lot of experience leveraging. And this is one of the skills where I really honed this leveraging skill by working with a man that had this nailed. And he was so willing to teach me. So he's one of the reviews of my book, and I acknowledge in my acknowledgements that he has every one of these female strengths, but leveraging was the one that I really had to round the edges on to really perfect it.
So what would you say to those who might look at leveraging, specifically one of the 5 innate strengths, as self-serving, as opposed to a strategic approach to your career, much like, so to build a parallel to the supply chain world that most of us are in, not dissimilar to building a strategic relationship with a vendor or a customer, right?
Yes.
Would you agree that that strategy to build and nurture those business relationships doesn't diminish the sincerity of the relationship?
Absolutely. Well, you know what? I'm going to tell you something. This is so embarrassing. I see that we have a delivery truck in front of us, and if he rings that doorbell, I'm going to be really upset. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. It's not supposed to come from this afternoon.
My dogs are going to bark any minute, so it's okay.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And can you give me 1 second? I so apologize.
That's okay.
1 second.
Not a problem at all. This is the world we live in now, right? Where we're all joining in remotely and using our technology to connect.
Yeah, he didn't need a signature. We're all good. But I remember your question, and it's a great question. Wait, okay, I just lost it. What was it?
Is it okay to look at this as a way to—
yes, okay, yes. Oh,
relationships, not self-serving?
Yeah, such a great question. Such a great question, especially for women. And this is one of the things where when you asked before, are we ready to talk about this? There are differences between male and female. And it's good to know what those are. It's even good to know what those are to have a great personal relationship with your spouse, right?
Absolutely.
if you're in a male-female situation. It's good to know your differences no matter what kind of situation you're in. So good relationships are reciprocal. And I think sometimes as women, one of our weaknesses can be this idea that no matter who it is, we have to give. And failing to recognize that healthy relationships are reciprocal. We don't go out and say, oh, I'm going to get married. I'll marry anybody because I don't want to take my own personal benefit into consideration. No, we take into consideration what makes us happy, what's going to work for us, what we will gain benefit from.
A good balance.
Yeah, because reciprocity is important in relationships. So men have been doing this for years. So you have to look at, if I built a relationship with someone that could help me, is that self-serving? No, it's smart. You're going to have more motivation to give to them in order to build the relationship, and they're going to have more to give back to you. It's healthy. It's called a healthy relationship.
Absolutely. So the chapter on emoting really resonated with me. And I know you know this, and Kathy probably knows this as well. I'm a big fan of being enthusiastic and really liking what you do and showing that passion for what you do, which is the reason why, I'm so happy in this world of supply chain. Is it up to us to tamper that enthusiasm if we encounter individuals in our careers that are not such big fans of enthusiasm?
Right. Well, there's several issues there. Number one, it depends on who's not a fan. If it's your boss or the company leader, I would start to think, is this the right place for me? Right? Because that's not showing a lot of leadership. Every good leader wants to see enthusiasm.
Absolutely.
If it's a peer, then it's a matter of just neutralizing that person and shining in spite of that. Don't let the downers get you down. And I talk a lot about that in this chapter, that it's not about tamping down your emotion. It's about governing them so that they bring positive benefit to the company. And that's really the key. There are some emotions that we should process outside the workplace, and there are more productive emotions to utilize in the workplace. But we have emotion down, so why not channel it and become that force for good? So what I tried to do in the book is show how you would use that emotion to propel a forward momentum and be recognized as a leader. You can do this from every level, any level of a company.
Did you find that out of the 5 innate strengths, that emoting is probably the one that might get the most interesting reaction from the other sex? When you talk about emotion, like immediately, I know at least with my husband and my 13-year-old son, like emotion is just not something that is a part of their world.
Right. Well, you know what, obviously I don't know them, but I would make the case that it probably is. They just express it differently, right? Because they're your family, so I know they're good people. And on some level, everybody emotes. It's just the way you express it. So one of the things, and I actually don't talk about this in the book, but one of the things that I do coach my clients on has to do with mirroring the level of enthusiasm in your workplace. However, sometimes if you're going to stand out as a leader, sometimes you need to break through that. So mirroring can sometimes be a double-edged sword. If you're always connecting your emoting to a solution, and this is, as you know, what I talk about in the book, then it's hard to criticize. It's hard to criticize because unlike other people, complainers, downers, people who want to bring out what the worst is, you're actually pivoting and going, yeah, this sucks, but I'm going to offer a solution here and do it with enthusiasm.
Yeah, so let's touch on that a little bit more, because you mentioned in your book that when used right, these strengths can really help to overcome some of those situations like workplace bullies or micromanagers or bosses who just don't see our value.
Right. It's the emoting coupled with leveraging. When you have a bully in your midst, what you need is a strong relationship with someone that influences them. Sometimes even their boss, maybe. So what I always do in the book, I talk about the process to decide who you're going to build a relationship with. And I say, look at those people that are giving you trouble. Look at those, I call them roadblocks, right? Who get in your way, who are always throwing marbles in your path. Who influences them? That's who you want to build a relationship with, or at least one of the people, because it can neutralize, often does neutralize the bullies, micromanagers, and others.
Give some examples of how maybe some of your clients that you've coached over time to use these strengths.
Yeah, okay. So let's see, there's Yvonne. She was having a hard time getting her ideas heard with her boss. And she used a strategy that let's see what this is part of. This is part of Leveraging Chapter, to meet with them ahead of the group meeting they were having and really ground truth her ideas and massage them a bit. So she knew he was on board before the meeting. And so a lot of times women, we think the meeting is to meet, discuss, and decide. Men go to the meeting to confirm what they've already decided. So we're just going to do what the men are doing, right? And that way, by the time you get to the meeting, you have a well-baked idea and it's going to pass. It's going to go through. It's going to get support. And that's what Yvonne is experiencing. I used to go to my board meeting. I used to say, I never go to a board meeting where I'm not pretty sure I know what the outcome is going to be. So that's the strategy she used. Stephanie, she's my neuroscientist client. She wanted to get into the leadership team of her university. And the structure there was very male dominated, very hierarchical, very, what do they call that, tenure based. And she just had some amazing ideas. And we worked on this idea of leverage and giving with her boss. Giving really sold it for her. And after working on a number of strategies for about 8 months, she got invited to the leadership team. She had earned that trust and she got invited to the leadership team. Another example, one of my clients wanted a contract deal with a health club. And she had been working on this for a year with this particular executive within the club, sending him emails, never a response for a whole year. And we worked together on a giving aspect, just in an email, really simple thing that she did, and got an immediate response because she connected with something he cared about. And that's that giving strength that we have. And it's so simple to do sometimes, to just get that connection going of someone that you really need. I have people who have overcome being fired multiple times to get their dream job. I've had people deal with a micromanager in such a way that they were able to gain more autonomy and get the micromanager to kind of back off of hovering over them all the time. There's all kinds of benefits, and it all wraps around the idea of handling those things that stand in your way. And they're always going to be people. They're always going to be people. So since this is relationship based and human being based, it works.
So as we work remotely more and more, right? Not just due to the pandemic, but we were actually trending in that direction to a small extent prior to, and will likely continue down this path post-pandemic, where part-time, maybe even full-time, more and more of the workforce is working remotely.
Yeah.
How are those abilities to use those innate strengths impacted?
They're really not. You just have to do them in a different way. It's funny, when the pandemic started at Cal State Fullerton, the Women's Leadership Program has a board of directors. And my specific role, other than curriculum, collaborating on the curriculum, is fundraising, which fundraising takes influence. You have to know how to influence to fundraise. And so our board was saying, you know, oh, it's the pandemic, we're shutting down. Lacy, you're gonna have a really hard time getting funding. Well, I didn't. In fact, I was able to double our resources last year. So it actually gave me a little bit of a benefit because people didn't have as many distractions. I actually was more easily able to get a hold of people and have coffee, Zoom meetings with them. They're more attentive to their email. I don't know if you've noticed, but since the world opened up, like, people are starting to get scattered again. So it actually, I think, can work in a positive way. There's no reason you can't build relationships in a virtual world. You just got to do it a little differently. I will say this, one of my clients is having a tad bit of difficulty because her company is international, and some of the people she needs to build relationships with are completely opposite sides of the world, but yeah, it's not something that she didn't deal with in the real world either. So I think it's possible.
That's a good point. So out of all the chapters that you wrote, what was the one that you found the most challenging to write about?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I think giving because most of my clients, my experience, I'm glad I wrote this after 5 years of coaching, right? Because I've coached a lot of women who have been in a position like I have been of being what I call an overgiver. So the notion that you're going to go out and give to build relationships is like, oh my gosh, I'm dying already. I'm propping up my family over here. I'm taking care of my kids. My boss is always a mess, so I'm always picking up the pieces there. And now you want me to give more. That's why I go so much into depth on what a functional relationship is. And then later in the book, under delivering, go into ways of prioritizing. Because sometimes we put energy into relationships that are a waste of our time. So it really was convincing women in that first chapter. How do I convince women that this is worth doing, that it's not a matter of giving more, it's giving more strategically?
Yeah, so I think that that chapter specifically where you lay out the need to sit down and write out exactly what are your priorities, what are your life priorities. At first I read it and I thought, well, yeah, okay, I got that, did that, no problem. I do, vision boards every once in a while as an exercise with my girls, but that's a little different. I had to really think about what you were suggesting we do and apply that to what I've naturally done over the years and realize there is a big difference there. Your vision is your vision. It's where you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or maybe even a month, right? But your priorities and therefore, what you're going to introduce or allow into that vision is really a different exercise or a different approach. So I really appreciated that. And I'm proud to say I've taken your advice since then. I have sat down and done that, not only for myself, but also then with my husband and said, okay, now we've been married almost 20 years. We've never really had this conversation. We thought it just kind of naturally happened, but these are my priorities in my life for my family, for my career. What do you think? How does that align with yours? So it was a really great conversation. I that's another one of the many, many areas of the book that really stood out to me, Lacy.
That's fabulous. I'm so glad to hear it. People laugh, but me and my husband have a strategic plan.
I have no doubt.
It absolutely helps us communicate about where we're going. And the more hands on deck you have in a direction, the quicker you're going there. And why it's important for you, Sheila, specifically, and this is, everybody will gasp when they hear this. Women, if they don't start elevating themselves right now, women and their careers with an approximate $1 million less of collective income than men over the course of their career. So imagine the impact we can have if our husbands are aligned in helping us achieve things, if we're aligned and then our whole family is aligned, we can whittle away at that and get to our goals quicker.
Absolutely. And if the younger generation, so back to the question earlier about, who are you really targeting with this? We got to make sure that this concept and how to apply and utilize these strengths are really understood and practiced by the younger generation as they're entering the workforce, right? Because if they can utilize them right from the start, they're in a much, much better position throughout their career.
Absolutely. It makes a huge impact throughout their career. And in fact, some of the young girls that I worked with at Cal State Fullerton, who are now in their 6th year of the beginning of their career, are promoting faster than their peers. And they're noticing as they're watching the competition and how things shake out at their companies, what they know that others don't know. And it's really wonderful.
It's got to be great to see that in practice.
Absolutely.
So back to the topic of, introducing this or delivering this message to the men in our lives. How do we do that in a way that isn't either off-putting or misunderstood? I think you covered it really well at the beginning where you said, listen, this is not, about, women or women against men, or not taking into account that we all work collaboratively and we should all be leveraging our individual strengths to the benefit of the organization and our personal lives. But how do we do that in a way that, I guess, delivers the message effectively? And then, is there a follow-up book? Maybe too. Maybe your husband, Dean, can write the follow-up book to the
Yeah,
men?
since you mentioned that, I was like, yeah, I should write a follow-up book because there's more work to be done there. Okay, I'm not going to claim to have all the answers. There are a couple of things though that I can mention. One is that I went to my husband, when I left my career and was one of the authors for Keys to Conscious Business Growth, I really started delving into the research. And there are so many things that wonderful men have no idea about. As a woman, I had no idea about were going on in sort of our unconscious relationships. So I went to my husband and I said, if something were happening that actually harms me in a way or could harm me in a way that we don't realize, would you be open to me telling you about it? And well, what do you mean? Well, I don't know if you've ever seen this research, but it's proven that men tend to interrupt women twice as often as they interrupt men, right? Actually, what's more embarrassing is women do that too. They interrupt women 50% more than men. And there's strategies to get around that. But just telling him that, he was like, really? Are you kidding me? Like, I would never even have thought that. So now that opens the door for every time he interrupts me in a conversation to say, honey, it's about building awareness. Honey, I don't do it in front of people. I tell him later, I don't know if you realize, but you interrupted me. And now it's been about a year, right? And I can see him in social settings, sort of standing back and making sure he doesn't interrupt when I start telling a story or something. And it's magnificent. So that's a personal relationship. How do you do it at work? I think with the closest male relationships I've ever had, I could probably get away with saying the same thing and saying, is this a conversation you're willing to have, that you're open to having, and how should we do it? Let them tell you how they want to have the conversation. Is it, in the workplace, once a month we're going to get together and I'd like you to download what you've observed. And as they're building their awareness, ask them to do the same thing. There's a number of ways to get the conversation going. It is a great follow-up book. I'm contemplating that, Sheila, because of your brilliance. But yeah, it's difficult. You really have to pave the way for men to understand you are not the enemy, and I know it. I'm simply trying to be your equal in the workforce. So are you open to things that we both don't understand?
Yeah, absolutely. And I found, though, although with a little different purpose, I found that approaching those conversations by making sure that they understand that part of your intention is not just the advancement of your career or influencing the situation, but it really is in impacting positively the outcome for the benefit of the organization.
Absolutely.
Right? Because in the end, that's what we're here for. That's what we serve in these senior leadership roles to do. It is to achieve corporate objectives for the benefit of the company and therefore the employees that benefit from the success of the company. So sometimes just laying that right out there, right from the beginning, can produce a little different conversation as well.
Absolutely. And what you just did in that is you pivoted, as we talked about in emoting, towards a solution with a problem that exists. So
yeah,
great job.
See, I'm a good student. I can still learn. So you and I have talked a lot in the past about how women can sometimes be some of our biggest challenges or not our biggest supporters. And I think a lot of it is unintentional. I think it just comes from some of those, what I would call maybe an innate weakness in us. And I think you've used the term calling it scarcity, or there's this feeling of scarcity. Can you talk a little bit about, do you feel like that's gotten better? Or do you feel like this is going to help us to get there to where we're really supporting each other in the way that we should be and the way that men are?
Right. Wonderful question. Well, several things. The younger generation is showing less of a proclivity to compete than us older generations. I think that's because we have made some progress, not a lot, but some. But I also think that, you're going to meet different kinds of people in the workforce. I probably had some competitive nature in me until I had an awareness of it. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm the enemy. I need to change this around, right? Yeah. So there are women that do it unconsciously, and then there are women who do it very intentionally. There's good and bad people everywhere. There's good and bad habits everywhere. So you deal with the situation that you're faced with depending on what the reasons are. I think a lot of times you can tell when there's a woman deliberately trying to undermine you versus she just made a mistake.
Yeah.
And when someone just made a mistake, it's easy to go, we were just talking about having that ginger conversation about how to open up an awareness and say, hey, can we support each other? Let's be a team. Let's create I used to call it the Professional Besties Club. Now I call it the Female Friends community. But it's getting that community for us that men have called the Good Old Boys Club. I've never thought the Good Old Boys Club was a bad thing. This is men helping each other succeed. We got to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
So I think it's getting better, but when you have that, I call them roadblocks of a competitive woman that's in your way, I've overcome them so many times through leveraging, but you got to have the right relationships. And again, I go back to who is the competitive woman, who influences her? Who do you need to build a relationship with that will neutralize her when you have a relationship with them? And, is it unfortunate that we have to do that? No, but I'll tell you, the practice makes you very influential. And then you're able to use your power for good. I always tell women, use your power for good. I'm not here to teach you how to manipulate. This is how to lead with your own strengths. So that's one way to neutralize.
Lead with your own strengths. I think that's great. So is it fruitful or worthwhile at all to try and understand why that individual feels the need to undermine you? Often it comes from a sense of insecurity, or it comes from, some perceived, potential loss if they aren't asserting themselves or becoming a dominant figure in whatever the situation is.
Yeah. I actually did a video on having this kind of a conversation on my YouTube channel. I think it boils down to going back to having that meeting in private and saying, hey, I noticed this. I'm perceiving that this is what it is. Am I reading you right? Tell me what's going on here. I just want to have a great relationship with you. Are you willing to have this discussion with me? I love the "are you willing to" terminology, because it's really hard for someone to say, no, I'm not willing to. And if they do, then you know what you're dealing with. It's someone who is deliberately doing it and they don't want to have a great relationship. They want to power over you. So I think having that productive discussion I've had clients that have had great results from that kind of a conversation, and have the women on the other end either acknowledge it. Yeah, you're right. I don't know why I do that. Let me think about it. Or, wow, I didn't even realize I was doing that. I absolutely would like to change it. So I think giving them that opportunity is awesome. It's also part of leadership. Leaders are willing to have the difficult conversations, and these are difficult conversations, no question.
Absolutely. So I know we're getting a little short on time, and I want to make sure that we have plenty of time to answer any questions. So Kathy, are we lined up with some questions, or should I keep going?
You can keep going.
Okay, great. So another thing that I noticed, Lacy, which I'm a huge fan of, is the quotes that you have within the book.
Yes.
One that stood out to me, and I'm also a huge fan of hers, is the CEO and founder of Spanx, Sarah Blakely. She has a quote in there about how working moms are really the ideal employee. And if you think about it, as much as we juggle from the day that we have that child, and sometimes even sooner, just because of our nature, our nurturing nature, we really are programmed to juggle a lot of stuff. Why did that quote stand out to you?
Well, later in the book, let's see, what chapter is it in? Delivering. I also talk about same theme. Kevin O'Leary, who, if any of you don't know who he is, he's a shark on Shark Tank. He's a billionaire, and all he cares about is money. And so I'm sure you know the concept of Shark Tank, where they're investing money in order to make money in these companies. And 3 years ago, Kevin O'Leary said to his staff, I want you to investigate what my top performing, that means most profitable companies have in common. So they did that, and they were all run by women. All of them were moms. And so he was like, wow, this is astonishing. Number one, I think I want to invest in more women-run companies. But in addition to that, what are they doing differently? And here's the 3 things they were doing differently. And I do think this comes from exactly what Sarah Blakely points out, the juggle and the struggle. So the first thing they did differently is they established more realistic goals, so they more often met those goals. And by realistic, I don't mean that they weren't a push, but the men oftentimes had huge, lofty goals that wouldn't get met. The women were meeting their goals more often. So that was one. Number 2, the women tended to be more collaborative with their staff in terms of the direction of the company, and their staffs were happier because they were meeting their goals. So they felt like, I'm working for a winning company, right? So those 2 things are really impactful. But when he got into looking at why this is, he really looked at they're better prioritizers, and he thinks it's because they're moms. So that you're in this impossible situation. In a lot of marriages, there isn't equal distribution of duties. And I would say if men want to establish this skill, if you're not already equally sharing with your spouse household and child duties, do it, because you'll gain amazing work skills. And the work skill is prioritizing. So the women can never do it all. So they're always deciding to do the most important things. And that translated to business. There was no wasted time. They were always working on the most important things, and that translated to profit. So that's what Sarah Blakely's talking about, is that women who are moms, and I love this, because it used to be, oh, if you're a mom, then you're going to be taken away from work. You have other priorities. We don't think you're going to give your all. Who would have ever thought? This brought tears to my eyes when I heard this, and now it's starting to resonate, and other people are figuring it out, that being a mom ought to be actually a job qualification. It makes you more savvy in terms of prioritizing. And I'm sure this goes for Mr. Moms too, right? Those men out there who have had that child rearing responsibility. It's a great training ground for business. And who would have ever thought?
Yeah, and negotiating as well. I will say.
Oh, yes, negotiating good behavior. And
absolutely, whether you're negotiating with a 2-year-old to take a nap, or
yes,
a 16-year-old to be home on time, a lot of negotiation in the motherhood department for sure. As you know.
Yes, absolutely.
I could keep going forever, Lacy, on just asking you the millions of questions that I have. But before I do that, I want to give you an opportunity. Are there any other parts of your book? Are there any other strengths that we have not already touched on that we've got to use this time to make sure that the listeners, understand a little bit more about? I know we talked about emoting. I talked about the enthusiasm and being passionate about things as one example of emoting, and giving, obviously, a big one, right? Do we want to go back to any of them? I want to look through them just real quick, because I feel like there's so much more we can cover.
Well, I can respond to that by just touching on the last 2. In the book, I tried to give research that backs up that these strengths are natural to us. Resilience is something that is natural to us, and that's been studied at Berkeley and UCLA. And I just want women to know resilience is natural, and it's part of the reason we live longer than men. And it's something you need to really leverage on purpose in your career, because what we're learning is failure is part of success, right? And women have this resilience to get past that quickly, and that's been studied. Unfortunately, where that comes from has to do with how we're treated differently as little girls than little boys are. So there's these very slight microaggressions or inequalities that happen very early in our life, and we rebound and we get okay and we get happy anyway. So we're kind of like that. So that bouncing back nature that we have is integral to deliberately apply on the failures on the road to success. The other thing is delivering. I really make it a point that everything you deliver makes no difference if somebody doesn't value it. And that is sometimes news to some of my coaching clients, is that, well, I know what the company needs. I know what these other people need. That's great. If they don't think they need it, then it's falling on a deaf crowd. So yes. Really understanding, a lot of coaches that I have, it's like, if you don't know what your boss wants, go ask. If you don't know what keeps them up at night, go ask, because you can't deliver exactly what they need or unique solutions unless you know the problems they're having and the challenges that they have. So those two things we haven't really talked about too much. I do think that women are good at delivering as well, but we tend to think of it as more and more and more and more, and kind of to the point of the prioritizing. It just has to be the right stuff. It doesn't have to be this endless pile of stuff. It just has to be the right stuff.
So on resilience, you had mentioned in one of the earlier chapters that, you know, you should have that person in your life that you can just go and vent to, right? So when you have this, you know, struggle, or you're encountering something that isn't quite sitting right and you may need to vent or something else, obviously take it outside of the workplace, find that person that you can just go and vent to as a mechanism to let it out and then move on.
Yes.
And I do find that that is something that we tend to be, you know, pretty good about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And the only caveat to that is if the person you vent to is at work, that's a real risk. It's a real risk for a whole lot of reasons. So it's really good to have someone. It can be a mentor that's not in your immediate place of employment, but in the same field if you've built that level of trust. But, you know, I always say, you know, sometimes people get on me. It's like, oh, you know, crying ought to be okay in the workplace. You're against crying, Lacy. I'm not against crying. It's just that I'm trying to make it in a world of men who don't cry. So yeah. I'm not going to do it. You know, I'm going to figure out a way to process that tension outside of the environment I'm trying to succeed in, because it's not valued, right? So in the book, I give a strategy for getting rid of tears like that too. So.
I saw that too. Great stuff. So, Kathy, are we ready for questions?
Well, we do have one question. What is the bouncing back?
Yes. Okay. While you're doing that, I'm copying my links to buy the book and my contact information. If any of you are interested in buying the book, I'm doing pre-sale signed copies. I have my first 100 right here. It goes on sale on Amazon next week, Tuesday. But there's a link here to purchase the book if you're interested, and I will send you a signed copy. And then there is a link to my website, and you can contact me personally. I'm going to be doing some group coaching around the book, which is less expensive than one-on-one. So if you're interested in any of that, glad to help. So yes, let's do a question. Do we have one? I saw something pop up in the Q&A. No, maybe not.
Yes, let me just get to it again. Okay. What is the bouncing back?
Oh, yes. What is the bouncing back? Bouncing back is, so sometimes when people experience a failure, if you ever talk to someone, we all know someone like this. You talk to them maybe at a social gathering, and they're talking to you about how they didn't get their promotion, or they didn't advance the way they wanted to, or they never became a CEO, or they never got that awesome deal because of something that happened to them way back in their history, maybe even in their childhood, maybe even earlier in their career. That is a person who has not bounced back from that trauma or tragedy. I'm a firm believer in therapy, or whatever it takes to get past serious trauma, because it does hold you back. What women have innate within them is the ability to bounce back a little quicker. I'm not saying we always do it, but it is innate, and our bodies show that forth in the childbirthing process. Whether you have a baby or not doesn't matter. Our bodies are built to go through this amazing trauma, and the minute that baby's on your chest, you're like, oh, my baby. It's like you completely bounced back from a major bodily trauma, right? It's just something we're hardwired to do. So I'm suggesting that bouncing back from failures or a negative interaction with your boss, doing that quickly is the stuff of successful people. Doing it slowly is what keeps people from progressing. So I give you some tools to run yourself through that bounce back process in the book. And I'll just tell you it now. Basically, the first thing you need to do is give yourself what you need. So when there's a failure, it's often a loss, it's often a shock, and you have something that only can make you feel better. So maybe it's talking to a friend, maybe it's taking a nap, maybe it's having a glass of wine, maybe it's yelling at the wall, whatever it is, you need to give yourself what you need. The second part though, and you can do that for, a week or two, but then you need to move on to what can I learn from this situation? And then third, what is my next right move? And sometimes you can't think, what is my whole plan to get out of this mess? Sometimes it's just what's your next right move, and then complete that. And then what's your next right move, and what's your next right move. So this whole process, it's sort of a truncated grieving process. Successful people do it in a matter of days, weeks, maybe months. Unsuccessful people do it in a lot of months or years or never. So not only is it innate within us to do it, I think when we're cognizant of that, we can deliberately apply bouncing back when we have a failure at work.
So what do you think about this, Lacy? I had a mentor of mine many years ago give me this advice. He said that oftentimes when you do encounter, see, I told you the dogs are going to bark at some point in time.
No problem.
When you encounter those moments, whether it's a bad performance review or you didn't get the response that you wanted, oftentimes you might feel like you need to question everything about your approach, your capabilities. Am I really worthy of this job? Don't do that. That was basically advice. Don't overthink it. Oftentimes you are making it a much bigger deal than the person that is delivering that advice to you or has given you that piece of information that's not sitting so well. Just take it at its word, pull out of it what you can control, what you can change, and focus on that. Don't wallow in it or carry it around for too long.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with your mentor. And this is another that you asked me before we got on the call about weaknesses. And I think one of our weaknesses is self-confidence. People are making it to high positions with half the skill we have. And here's an example. This has also been studied. It has to do with applying for a job, right? So where a woman is overanalyzing, do I meet the qualifications? Am I really right for this position or whatever? Men will apply for a job when they feel that they meet 60% of the qualifications. Women think they have to meet 100% of the qualifications. And what's so silly about this, and just bringing this to light, I think is helpful. I hope that more women will say, hey, yes, I have value even though I make a mistake. Oh, and by the way, Sarah Blakely's father taught her that failure was part of success. So if we're working with people that don't understand that, the knowledge of that is changing. So be happy about that. The knowledge of that is changing. But don't think that you need to have 100% of the qualifications. Like, let's say those of you that are moms. I don't know, I can't think of any moms that I know personally that went out and read every book on child rearing before they had kids. They said, I'll figure it out. So why don't we do that with work? We can figure it out. We're talented. We have brains. So it's absolutely doable to figure something out. It's absolutely doable to overcome a failure. It's part of success. The idea that success doesn't include failures, that's naivete. That's not true.
Great point. Kathy, what's our next question?
That's actually all the questions we had from the audience, but if anybody would like to submit a question, please put it in the chat or in the Q&A, please.
I will say while you're waiting for that, I know we just have, looks like 5 minutes left. If any of you don't have some type of a coach or aren't in some kind of group coaching program, we can take a lesson from athletes. No athlete expects to be their best without someone standing on the sideline who's an expert, looking at what they're doing and giving them coaching. The path to succeed for them is always to have a coach. It's becoming more and more common in work now, and that's how people are getting ahead beyond more quickly than they could typically expect. So if you don't have one, I just encourage you to look at that and to find someone that can help you get where you want to go. And that is that objective outside wisdom when we get so myopic and focused in on some of the problems that we face. I see Sheila has logged off there for a minute. Sheila and Kathy, are you still there?
Oh, I'm here.
Okay.
Okay. No problem. No problem. I think we did lose Sheila though. Oh, here she is.
Oh,
She's
there she
back.
is. Okay. You're
Oh, you're
muted.
on mute.
Sorry, I was trying to get the dogs to quit barking.
Oh. Good job. I don't hear him now. You're very
Nope.
powerful. You must be using your female strengths.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
We just got another question. Did not see the book link or group coaching info.
Okay. Let's see. Just email me for group coaching info and let me put the book link in there again. I'm copying it now and then I'll put it into the chat. My company is Real Women, Real Success. I just put it in the, oh, it's just to the panelists. That's the problem I'm having.
Yeah,
Okay,
if you want
so
me to, I'll copy
do
it.
to everyone, panelists and attendees. Okay, here we go. There we go. And then I'll put my contact information. Yeah, if you just want to email me, go to my website. You can call me. Either one of those is, any of those is fine. And I'll email you more about the group coaching opportunities. Okay, did that go through?
Yes, it did.
Oh, it
Everybody should
did?
have it. Everybody should
Real
have it
Women,
right
Real
now.
Success. Oh, let's see. The company is realwomenrealsuccess.com. My email is lacy@lacyshane.com, but I just copy this and I'm gonna try it one more time to get my contact information in there. Okay, there it is. Okay, it's, oh, I think I'm it's in there, but it's not, when I hit enter, it's not posting for some
Yeah,
reason.
I just put it in there.
So, that's weird. You do just hit enter, right? Oh, there we go.
Mhm.
Okay, now it's in there twice.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that it?
All right. Well, I wish we had another hour, but I'm looking forward to catching up with you as we continue to, roll this thing out. I'm super excited about this, and
Thank
and
you.
look forward to the follow-up book to
Yes.
this.
Yeah, here's the book. Here's the book, and then the next one's going to have to be on how to have delicate discussions with men about male-female differences.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Lacy and Sheila. This was actually a really fascinating conversation today. And thank you both for taking the time out to join us and to be a part of this program. And also thank you to all of our attendees. So at this point, we'll close out the program. We will be putting this particular program on our YouTube channel, and we will put it on LinkedIn, the recording. So if you would like to share it with any of your colleagues, please do so. Again, thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.